It was a quiet Friday morning in Warner Robins, Georgia until a 911 call shattered the calm. A husband reported finding his wife dead, an apparent suicide. But the scene told a far darker story, a brutal murder, meticulously planned by the very man she trusted most. This is their story. Lucille Ann McManus was the epitome of kindness and warmth. A mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother, she dedicated her life to her family and community. Widowed for several years, Lucille found solace in gardening, volunteering, and cherishing moments with her loved ones. Her trusting nature led her to explore online dating, seeking companionship in her later years. Lucille's family recalls her excitement about meeting someone special, unaware that her newfound love would lead to her demise. Brian McManus appeared to be the epitome of charm and sophistication, a man with a distinguished background, worldly experience, and the kind of demeanor. He presented himself as a former officer of the London Metropolitan Police with a career spanning 17 years. Brian seemed like the answer to the prayers of someone seeking stability, companionship, and genuine affection. Yet behind this carefully crafted image lay a far darker reality. Brian's law enforcement career had ended, not in triumph, but disgrace. Multiple complaints of sexual harassment from female colleagues led to his dismissal from the Metropolitan Police. His prior relationships were equally troubling. A marriage in Idaho ended after his arrest for domestic violence, revealing a pattern of manipulation, abuse, and predatory behavior. These details, however, were deliberately omitted from his online persona. Brian's calculated deception is part of a larger pattern observed in online romance scams. Scammers like Brian exploit emotional vulnerabilities, promising love and commitment, while their true intentions remain financial gain. Lucille Ann McManus, widowed and seeking companionship in her golden years, became precisely the type of target Brian sought. Their interactions moved quickly, from carefully worded messages to intimate phone calls. He created a sense of trust and urgency. Within 3 months, he proposed marriage. By presenting himself as loving and devoted, he gained access not only to Lucille's life, but also to her family and home. His manipulative tactics masked his true motives, making it nearly impossible for Lucille, or those around her, to see the danger until it was far too late. When Brian McManus entered Lucille Ann McManus's life, it seemed like a dream fulfilled. Within just 3 months of meeting online, he had proposed, and Lucille, longing for companionship after years of widowhood, eagerly accepted. The marriage was swift, but to Lucille, Brian moved into the family home on Wake Forest Drive. He quickly became part of the household that included Lucille's granddaughter, Jessica Terrell, and 2 great-grandchildren. Outwardly, he played the devoted husband, joining family dinners, helping around the house, and participating in everyday routines. Brian seemed increasingly detached during family gatherings, often withdrawing from conversations or displaying a calculated politeness that bordered on artificial. His charm felt rehearsed, as if every word and gesture were carefully designed to maintain the illusion of devotion. The first real cracks in his facade appeared through his frequent trips to Florida. Officially business meetings, these excursions were increasingly suspicious to the family. Jessica and other relatives couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, whispering to each other about the inconsistencies in his stories and the timing of his departures. Yet, despite these warning signs, Lucille's hope remained steadfast. She chose to believe in the love she had found, seeing the best in Brian even as others around her grew wary. Behind closed doors, however, Brian's dual life was already taking shape. The trips to Florida were not business-related, they were visits to his mistress, while Lucille clung to her dream of companionship. The rest of the family watched uneasily, sensing that the man who smiled so easily in front of them might be hiding something far more sinister. This delicate balance of trust, doubt, and deception would soon set the stage for tragedy. The fragile illusion of Brian McManus's charm shattered the moment. Lucille Ann McManus stumbled upon a text message that was never meant for her eyes, intended for his mistress in Florida. The message was intimate, affectionate, and unmistakably revealing. It exposed a double life that Lucille had never imagined. The man she had trusted, married, and welcomed into her family home was living a secret life of deceit, undermining every promise he had made. When Lucille confronted Brian, the scene was electric with tension. Her voice trembled with anger and heartbreak as she demanded answers, seeking not only an explanation, but also justice for the manipulation she had endured. She made it clear that she would report their marriage to immigration authorities, threatening to expose the fraud that had underpinned their entire relationship. For Brian, this was a catastrophic revelation. If Lucille followed through, his path to permanent residency would be destroyed. Brian's reaction was emblematic of a manipulative, narcissistic partner. Brian's mind immediately turned to self-preservation. The threat of exposure triggered a calculated, dangerous response. His calm, composed demeanor gave way to a simmering desperation. Lucille's moral courage and desire for justice directly challenged Brian's constructed reality, forcing him to make a choice. Lucille's discovery and confrontation accelerated the trajectory toward tragedy. Her determination to expose the fraud highlighted both her strength and the danger inherent in challenging someone as calculating and remorseless as Brian McManus. The morning of November 24, 2023, began like any other in the quiet streets of Warner Robins, Georgia. Sunlight filtered gently through the trees, and the scent of autumn lingered in the air. Inside 200 to Wake Forest Drive, however, Lucille Ann McManus's day would come to a devastating and violent end. What began as a simple morning routine, a shower, a cup of coffee, and the comfort of home, was violently interrupted by a man she had trusted with her heart. Brian McManus had been watching and calculating for weeks, learning Lucille's routines, her vulnerabilities, and the rhythms of her household. When the moment came, he struck decisively. The first blow came from a rubber mallet, heavy and unyielding, smashing against Lucille's head. She fell, dazed and disoriented, fighting instinctively to protect herself. Blow after blow landed, leaving her body battered, blood staining the walls and ceiling, each mark a silent testament to the ferocity of the attack. When the mallet alone did not end her life, he used his bare hands to strangle Lucille, ensuring that her struggle was ended. Defensive wounds, scratches on his arms, told the story of a desperate fight, of a woman unwilling to surrender to the man she had trusted. Her fingernails bore his DNA, a chilling, incontrovertible clue that would later become pivotal evidence. After the murder, Brian meticulously staged the scene to suggest suicide. He stripped her body, positioned it across the bed, and left no weapon in sight. The calculated placement of the scene was designed to deceive even the most trained investigators. Yet, despite his efforts, inconsistencies were everywhere. No gun, no shell casings, and no powder residue contradicted his fabricated story. Brian called 911. His voice was calm, almost eerily composed, as he reported what he claimed was an obvious self-inflicted gunshot wound. The chilling contrast between the brutality of Lucille's death and the measured tone of her husband created an immediate sense of suspicion. Investigators later noted that his lack of visible grief, his mechanical recounting of events, and the subtle focus on whether he was being considered a suspect all pointed to a man who had planned this act with precision. Forensic evidence, the DNA under Lucille's fingernails, the blood patterns, and the missing weapon, combined with Brian's suspicious behavior, painted a clear picture. This was not a crime of passion, nor a sudden act of rage. It was cold, calculated, and entirely deliberate. The murder of Lucille Ann McManus was the final act of a manipulative, deceitful man who viewed human life as disposable, and whose obsession with self-preservation led him to commit one of the most chilling crimes Warner Robins had ever seen. The investigation into Lucille Ann McManus's murder began the moment Warner Robins Police Department officers arrived at the scene. The crime scene did not match Brian McManus's story of a suicide. There was no gun, no shell casings, and the extensive blunt force injuries on Lucille's body told a story of prolonged violence. Her defensive wounds, evidenced by scratches on Brian's arms, raised immediate suspicion. Detectives Carmen Thompson and Elizabeth Smith worked meticulously, interviewing neighbors and collecting security camera footage from the surrounding area. One neighbor reported seeing Brian taking the dog for a morning walk, but noted he had deviated from his usual route to a drainage ditch near the house. Investigators quickly focused on this clue, suspecting that he may have discarded evidence. When CCTV footage was reviewed, it revealed Brian's calculated movements. He had taken the mallet and his phone to the ditch, disposed of them in the water, and returned home less than 30 minutes before calling 911 to report the alleged suicide. Cell phone records and travel data added another layer to the investigation. The supposed business trips to Florida, which Brian had presented as legitimate work obligations, were actually visits to his mistress. Investigators also discovered a critical mistake. Brian had accidentally sent a text intended for his lover to Lucille, revealing the affair. This provided a clear motive. Lucille reported their marriage as fraudulent. Brian risked deportation and the collapse of his immigration plans. Blood found under Lucille's fingernails matched Brian's DNA, confirming a physical struggle consistent with defensive action. Brian attempted to mislead investigators, suggesting that Lucille's family or unknown intruders might have committed the murder. However, cell tower records, security footage, and alibi verification quickly dismantled these claims. Jessica Terrell, Lucille's granddaughter, confirmed her location at the time of the crime, corroborating the evidence and disproving Brian's attempts to frame others. As investigators pieced together the timeline, it became clear that the murder was both deliberate and calculated. Brian's actions, the disposal of the weapon, the lies to authorities. Every step he took, however, left behind traces that, when combined, created an airtight case. The collaboration between local police, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and forensic experts exemplified modern investigative efficiency by combining traditional detective work with advanced forensic science. Investigators were able to reconstruct the events of that fateful morning and establish Brian McManus as the sole perpetrator. Attention to detail and reliance on evidence-based procedures that ultimately ensured justice for Lucille Ann McManus. Brian McManus was arrested on November 25, 2023, just a day after the brutal murder of Lucille Ann McManus. Charged with malice murder, he faced the full weight of the law, but the courtroom drama was only beginning. The prosecution presented a meticulously organized case. DNA evidence under Lucille's fingernails directly linked Brian to the struggle in her final moments. Security cameras captured him disposing of the murder weapon in a drainage ditch during his morning dog walk, a cold, calculated act that contradicted his claims of innocence. Phone records and travel data revealed the affair with his mistress, as well as the lies about his alleged business trips to Florida, highlighting the manipulation and deceit that had permeated their relationship. Throughout the trial, Brian maintained a composed demeanor, often appearing almost detached as harrowing evidence was presented. Witnesses recounted his charm during the courtship and the warning signs they had initially overlooked. Experts explained the psychological patterns of manipulative partners, illustrating how Brian's narcissism and calculated behavior made him capable of sustaining multiple deceptions simultaneously. Cross-examination revealed contradictions in his statements. Family members, including Lucille's granddaughter, Jessica Terrell, delivered heartfelt testimony, recounting the warmth and love Lucille had brought to their lives. Their emotional statements underscored the depth of loss and betrayal making the courtroom tension almost palpable. Jurors were not only weighing facts, they were absorbing the human cost of Brian's calculated crimes. After several days of testimony, the jury retired to deliberate. The evidence was overwhelming, leaving little room for doubt. Within hours, they returned with a guilty verdict. The judge, Edward D. Lucamere, delivered a somber sentence: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In his words, Brian had basically bashed in the skull of another human being, a stark reminder of the consequences of deception and violent betrayal. The courtroom, filled with family, friends, and the community, breathed a collective sigh of relief. Justice had been served, but the emotional scars remained. Lucille's loved ones left the trial with a bittersweet sense of closure, the truth revealed, the perpetrator punished, yet a cherished life violently stolen. The trial stood as both a warning and a testament to the resilience of those left behind. Lucille Ann McManus's life was a tapestry woven from love, generosity, and a deep connection to her family and community. She spent her days caring for her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, tending to her garden, and spreading kindness to neighbors who adored her. Her home on Wake Forest Drive was more than a house, it was a sanctuary of warmth, laughter, and shared memories. For Lucille, life's later years were meant to be filled with companionship, joy, and the small adventures that make life meaningful. Her tragic and brutal death, however, is a stark reminder that even in the most peaceful communities, danger can lurk in unexpected forms. In Lucille's case, it came disguised as love, a charming man who infiltrated her life under false pretenses, exploiting her trust and generosity. Online dating, while offering hope and connection to millions of older adults, can also expose them to manipulation and fraud, according to the Federal Trade Commission. Romance scams cost Americans over $600 million annually, and older adults are disproportionately targeted because of their openness and desire for companionship.